Right now, during the sound of my voice, you're seeing B-roll of a Japanese contract Peabody. And I'm going to tell you something about this gun. The original finish was gone. It was buffed. It was hot dip blued, and it was allowed to rust again. So in this episode, we're going to try one more time. You know, I just said all that over that B-roll, and I got to tell you that in gunsmithing, there is very little in gunsmithing that a good hot fire won't fix. So let's get on down a rabbit hole because there is a lot of stuff got to be done to this Peabody to bring it back. Gotta love a good smoke in the morning. During the 1873 Springfield episode, I noted that you're never supposed to just stick a punch through one of these things and knock the tumbler off of the hammer by driving through, or else you'll wind up just blowing the backside off of this. That was done here. Somebody tried to braze it. There's no way it's going to take the torque. So what we did here, the email or snail mail dumpster coughed this up. We'll have to move the stirrup over, get all this fitted. This is a bearing. I'm going to talk a little bit about bearings, I think, why you don't have time to build an oil wedge. It's a plain bearing, but it really isn't. It's metal on metal. That's got to be done. This connector here and these two bands for the barrel bands were nickel plated, I'm guessing, during the 1950s. I don't know, somebody was using it as a parade weapon, but I have not seen any pictures of a Peabody ever that had these parts nickeled. We'll be denickeling these and rust bluing them along with the rest of the gun. The nose cap we found was held in by the cleaning rod, and don't freak out, but the cleaning rod is actually with this weapon, and that's got to be some kind of flipping award. So we got to make that screw to hold that in, and we've also got to make the rear screw for this, the machine screw that holds it to the receiver. This machine screw has got to be made. And then the sight elevator leaf spring. We're going to have to make a sight elevator leaf spring so that this thing will stand up, because right now it's a little flaccid. And I'm also going to show you how to tell whether or not you've put the rear sight on the gun the right way or the wrong way. This is a lot of little sub gizmos we got to do, so we may not show them all, we may, but we still got a lot of work to do, so off we go. If you take a look at the edge of this hole, you can see how it rolls off right here. There isn't a military weapon made ever, not even the Swiss, polish a gun down this hard. This thing was hot dip blued, and then it was allowed to rust like this. So we're about to do some things to this weapon. I don't want to hear it. This ship sailed on this thing twice. Here's another way you can tell whether or not it's been polished or not. We pull back up the barrel a little bit, and you can see how fuzzy the edges of all this is. This gun's been polished, and it probably in the 1950s, I don't know, but what is a Japanese Peabody doing in the United States? What are the possible transport mechanisms for a black powder era weapon showing up in the United States? One does wonder. Anyway, the general rust loading on this thing is this. So we got to get up in here. So we've talked about conversions before. We're going to get in, convert all this stuff off of here, and make these parts look a little bit better. This thing is really yutzed up. So we'll get in here and get all that done. But you see those numbers? Typically you put the sight on so that when you pop it up, you can read it, not the enemy. So we're also going to have to fix the fact that for a long time, this rear sight was put on backwards. Typically on a sight, the wide part of the groove is facing away from you. So you're looking at what amounts to a virtual knife edge. So if the sight's on the right way, it's this way. Typically, that's how you tell. Just throwing that out there, not calling anybody anything, but that's something else we got to fix. This is called a stirrup, and the function of this is to actually change the leverage on the lock, and I'll show you that. This is the original tumbler, and this original tumbler was not cut for a fly. And what the fly does is it rides the nose of the sear over the half-cock notch. This one, let me find the light right there. This one right here has a cutout for a fly. We don't care. It starts mattering when you got set triggers, and we don't have set triggers on this because you need to be able to just pop the sear and let it go. So this thing, you can see where I told you before where they popped it off. And if we find the happy place where this thing wants to go, did a quick fade there because I was allowing this thing to kick my butt. But what I want to look at is where the full cock notches are, where the half cock notches are, and about where the tumbler axles are. And it looks like we're going to get away with this. The square part and the square part are about in the right orientation. This is a modern manufacturer for, I'm thinking some sort of Italian, like a Spencer or something like that. The Spencers, the Peabody, the Sharps, they all use basically the exact same identical U.S. government hardware with a couple of variations here and there. So I think we're going to get away with being able to use this. The original stud was threaded 544 for holding on the stirrup. This had some kind of goofy metric deal in it. I just ran a 544 tap down through the hole here and was able to do that. So the stirrup will fit in this, but before we do that, we've got to come back now and we've got to make the hammer fit down over this. It's not just drop in. You don't just beat on it. There is a taper to the side of this that we have to get the taper right. So up in the vise here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I mounted the sear to see where full cock was, to know where the hammer is supposed to sit on this. We have to take up that much space here. Hold on a minute. We have to take up all that space here. That's not going to get drug in with this screw. It's not going to happen. So what we're going to do now is take this lock plate off and sit down and milk the sides of this square part in. So what we'll be doing is milking this back, these four sides. We'll just file, drop down until we've only got about, I don't know, maybe 1/8 of an inch here, and then we'll go ahead and pop it in with a hammer. I have this mounted in my aluminum jaws, and I don't have a lot of torque on this because you can bend parts of this. But what I'm talking about doing here is just taking off parts of this. Now this thing has been hardened, and it doesn't take much. We're just going to come in, and it's cutting. It's not skating. It's actually cutting. We don't want to take much off. You can maybe see some of the steel particles coming off of the file. And we're cutting sort of on a taper. Not a big one, but I'm actually wanting the nose of this thing to be smaller than the base, because I'd like it to draw up. Okay. Put this back in the lock plate because I want to know which end is up. It does matter. We have to come back at this the same way every time. So we know that that's full cock, so this has to mount in here like this. And we're already starting to make headway. We've taken up, just with that little bit of filing, we've taken up probably 1/3 of the remaining distance to go. So I'll do that again. We don't want to do too much because we don't want this sloppy. See, when we started out, we had all that slop. It would come all the way off the end of the sear, and now it's to right there. All right. So we can actually, I'm going to actually try to press this on right now. We're going to take a look at it. I've taken the sear off. We'll come down in between on the line of the jaws right here, and we'll use the vise to press this home. And now we're flush across the top and we're tight as all get out. Now we don't need it to be absolutely tight on the plate. We don't want it to be, because we would prefer if the hammer did not drag on the outside of the lock plate. To take this back apart again, this is where the last guy got in trouble. You just come down until this just kisses right there, all right? We get a brass punch that sits on top, and this will go through the square hole. In fact, this is the one that I took all those 73s apart with. You can see the end of it is a bit gnarled. And you get a big hammer. All right, I'm going to have Bruno pull back because I want you to see this. All right, I have the lock plate supported. I have the hammer supported. Set down on top of this and just drop the hammer on it. And pop it right through. And that is how you have to take that apart. So let's summarize here. Focus. To summarize, not a lot. I'm telling you, man, gunsmithing is a game at 10,000s. And this isn't bad for a modern manufactured part. It's beautifully heat treated, beautifully finished. We don't really know where it came from, but I would almost swear this is a Paeta or a Pedersoli part. Doesn't matter. We're going to make it work. Outstanding. We're going to get the rest of the lock cleaned up now. We'll get it back in a conservation bath, get it all cleaned up, and then we'll come back and put the lock back together again. This rear sight here is missing a spring that kind of looks like that. Here's what's left of it. And it's snapped off. You can see that the spring snapped off right where it goes over the ledge here. See what I'm talking about? So there's like a stress riser in there, and that's where it snapped off. So we'll just take a piece of this spring steel, cut it out so that it's the right width, trim it, let it fit, drill a hole in it, because there's a big screw that goes right down through the center of it, holds the sight on, and then what that'll do is bear up against this sharp surface right here. So it'll be vertical and it'll be horizontal. Yeah. That's not how I want to do that. I want to do it this way. I need a rule. I need a scale. Where's a banana when you really need one? Okay, it's about right. Okay. Follow. I really want to wait till this gets over 1300, but we'll put it in and let it heat up with it. Get this bad boy hot. I'll just set that back in there and come back in about 10 minutes. And when it gets over 1350 to 1400 degrees or so, we'll shut this thing off, let it soak for a little bit. Open up the door, let the furnace come down to about 800 or so. After we quench it, stick it back in, and it'll be a nice gooey spring. You'll notice how much time it took me to make it. Is it the prettiest spring in the world? No, but it's going to work. So this is our metric replacement tumbler right here. And we had to tap this screw out 544 so that we could use the original stud. This was in some metric size. So now we got the tumbler in, and then the other problem we have test assembled this lock once. And what we found out was that there was a little bit of excess material here that was impeding the sear's access to the full cock notch right there like that. So we ground that away. There was enough left. This tumbler, beautifully made, like I said before, we did a little bit of filing in order to get it to come over the top, and this is actually going to work for us. Putting the lock together, we went in and got all that rust off this lock plate, a standard conversion process, and then a single extra rusting because we're trying to get all that glitzy hot dip off the top of it. And we were able to, without sandblasting it, we did the whole gun without sandblasting it. And I got to tell you, that was actually pretty decent. All right, down to the towel. Not a very complex lock. The only thing you got to watch is this mainspring does two things. And you can see this very thin end. This mainspring is held by that screw, and it separates this spring into two pieces. The one that trips the hammer and the one that pushes down on the sear. You've got to be extremely careful. You do not have this on the lock plate without that screw there, because it will snap this in half. And I'm telling you that from personal experience, and don't be stupid like I was. And even the tumbler hole wasn't the right thread pitch for the original screw. So I had to go in and tap this out, and the screw did not need to be that long. So I went ahead and shortened it up so that this will now thread in. This was a 1024 thread. So that was the original thread pitch. So I made the metric parts conform to the original pieces that we had. Blued this because, God, it needed it. It's not perfect, but we didn't want to try it. Rust blued this. Took a little while. Worth it. The lock plate goes on the gun this way, so now we know that the mainspring is going to be pulling up and that's going to be full cock, so our hammer is going to go on here. So I'm just going to squeeze that. And all I did was get that in between the jaws right there and put it down until that's flush. I didn't have to squeeze it really hard, but just hard enough to put it on, because there is no planet on which this screw has enough guts to haul that together. You've got to use the screw in the vise. You cannot use this screw here. All this does is keeps the hammer from rattling off. When we found the gun, the stirrup was on a little wonky, and there are 3 different screws here, and 2 of them have long threads on the shank, and 1 of them have short threads. The short thread one is the one that the sear pivots on. All right. Let me get my hands out of the way here. Low dexterity day. Help me. Okay, here we go. That'll go in. Never tighten them all up at once, but all of these screws should be flush. We saw some evidence that somebody tried to gorilla this gun together, and they didn't have the screws in the right place. And it created a lot of hate and discontent up inside the inletting and bent stuff, and we just don't do that. Typically, these old military guns, when they're together the right way, there's only one way that they go together, and everything is flush. All these screw heads are flush right there. See what I'm saying? That's what the inside should look like. Now with the hammer all the way down, hook the stirrup, right? And we need to get that pin, well, boy, am I in a way here. this pin sticking down out of the bottom of the spring here is going to go inside that hole right there. So we want to hook this, get this near that hole, and then make sure that we've come under this screw. There's a little recess in the bottom of this spring for it. And then you can just kind of come up to full cock, and this will just drop right off, and there you go. Gonna make sure we got sear tension, half cock, doesn't go off, full cock. And then this has what's called a constant position sear on it. And if you ever build a muzzleloader, you'll see what I'm talking about, where the sear bar here, right here, you see how this is just about touching the bottom of the plate? All the way down at half cock, again, just touching there, and at full cock, which means this bar isn't going to 3 different positions, whether you're down or up. Makes it a lot easier to set your trigger up there. So this is actually an extremely well designed lock, and now it doesn't look like garbage. Okay, so this is the action after we've converted it. We converted it twice. We boiled it twice, and then we rusting solutioned it. And I'm going to tell you, we used a pretty aggressive wheel to knock some of that deeper rust off of it, and made it look a lot better. It's not that shiny deal, and it doesn't have all that rust on it. So here's the spring we made. It's nothing fancy. It was just a piece of spring steel, hacked it out. You get it to over 1350 degrees. And I've done this in previous episodes where we've heated it up with a torch and dropped it in the oil. But I'm going to tell you, that muffle furnace, I'm using it because I can. And it's giving me very repeatable results. So here's the rear sight after we dynamited all the crap off of that. The numbers on this, let me get them right there. There you can see the numbers. They have to face you. Okay, you don't want your enemy to read those numbers. We do. So we're pretty sure this sight was on backwards. This bad boy is just going to drop in there like that. And we've got 2 separate screws for this. One with a large head, one with a small one. And we're pretty sure that the large head one goes to the back and just covers all this up. So let's see here. There we go. And as that comes down, you'll start seeing this spring start to tension. And as that spring begins to tension, oh, we're not flaccid anymore. Who knew? Okay, that will allow us then to put this screw in. You don't have to grill these screws. All you got to do is bring them down until they touch off. So you run them down and give them a little tweak, and that's all you got to give them. And there we go. Now I have to move this forward just a hair, because we got this one down so tight it's not allowing that to pop up. So we're going to have to figure out what's going on there. And that's going to require, what I'm going to do here is this. I'm going to tighten this down, and I'm going to see if this leaves a little white spot on the top of the barrel. I want to see what that is. I also want to see if the spring is too far forward. Do all this testing after each fastener that you tighten down. You want to take a look. Okay, I don't see any mark on the top of the barrel. So what I think's happening is that this spring is so long that it's actually touching the end. So what I'm going to do is just take 5 seconds here, and I'm going to come in. You can see we only need to be that long, right? Let's get the light on it. Right there, there's a little silver spot. I'm going to cut the nose of this spring back just a little bit. I'm back now, and there's something I want to show you. Not only did I grind it a little bit shorter, but you see this silver spot on the back end? I've actually ground an upslope to it. So now, even though this spring is flat, I've committed us to this side being up. All right, and I'm seeing maybe if I can gain us a little bit of room. We did not have the original spring to go by. So a lot of this is just conjecture and a little bit of cut and try. Okay, make sure here I got the right screw head. This is the right one. So one of these, and the thread pitches on these are different too. So it's difficult to mess this up. Now, he who thinks something is foolproof has yet to meet all available fools, and I understand this. But just, you got to think here and just work your way through it one fastener at a time and have a little bit of patience. Okay, now we're still hanging up here, but it's better. Okay, it's better, which is exactly what I want. And we'll run this down. There we are. We're up and we're down. There's a small hang up here, but that will go away when we're all done. Now, we don't have the ladder on this, and I've taken this capture. It's set up like a dovetail, and this little helmet sits down over the top of this and it'll have to be tapped on, and that'll hold the slider in. But if you come over to a vise for a second, I'm going to show you how to tighten this up without screwing yourself. I've got this kind of knocked down in the vise here, and we want to bend these ears in a little bit without messing the rest of this up. There's a tendency when you bend this to just put a bow in the back of this thing, and it never works. And the way I have found to do this is to just lay a punch here with the whole thing supported and just gently give it a little bend here like this. And this will make these old military sliders hang on. Now, if we were really dedicated, we'd flip this thing over and do the other side, but I'm just going to take what I got here. We're going to want the notch on our side. We'll pop this down here, and now you can see that this is actually quite tight. Get that in there. Now that's tight, and that holds on where you want to set it. This part is dovetailed and it has a hole in it, and the hole is there for the screw to thread through. So this dovetail, and I'll get my fingers out of the way in a minute, that dovetail, again, I'm not really swinging this thing really hard, I'm just tapping with it. And then there's a little itty bitty screw here, and we'll just lay that over backwards, knowing that we have already swept all the garbage off the floor. So when we drop that screw, we can at least stand a snowball's chance in hell of finding it. Don't have to kill this, just bump it down until it stays. And now we have a fully operational rear sight, 100, 200, 300, 400. It picks up at 500 and goes all the way to 12 or 1300, which I think for a 43 Spanish is a little optimistic if the wind blows at all. One of the beauties of having one of these filter head screw assortments is that I've got everything from like a 080 all the way up to a 1228 in here. So we took a screw blank that was about the right size. So we take a screw blank and we fabricate. It's too big, so we go ahead and cut the head down, we cut the body down. We do all that, and we wound up making one of the missing screws for this gun out of an existing modern screw pitch. It wasn't exact, but we're not into the interference pattern yet. So that actually did a good job of replacing that one screw that was missing. The other screw we had to go after was the one that you see sticking out right here from the nose metal. So up inside, and that came out of a really adventurous tub of things called gun screws. Sits right underneath the sex wax. Anyway, so we've got that screw. So now how do you know how close to trim this? Well, I'm counting screw heads here. I'm counting threads. And I'm looking and I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 threads sticking out of this. So we'll take it out and we'll stick it through the screw plate. So this is my number 8. I got a 40, a 32. I got a bunch of holes drilled in this thing. I got a whole bunch of these little screw gizzies. They're really nice because I can cut screws off the sides and not get the crap burned out of me. And I said 7 threads, right? So, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I need to come out about 3 turns here. I need to come out 1, 2, 3. And now all we got to do now is stick a screwdriver in here and grind this sucker down flush. back it through the plate a little bit in order to comb the extra grinding parts off, hit it with a wire wheel, and we're right back. So I'm controlling this with the screwdriver bit. I could have cut it, but I'm lazy, so we'll just turn it all into grinding dust. See, it's almost there, and we have all this splatter around it. It's all right. We just come down smooth. So now we're smooth, and then we back this through the plate, and it cuts all that loose stuff off, right? And we can stick this out a little bit more. Give it a nice gentle kiss right there. And then while it's out, and I don't even know if this is in camera, but we'll come over to the wire wheel and just grind the end of it. Now that is hot as balls right there, but we didn't burn our fingers. We didn't get our fingers near the wheel. Far better way to do it. You got to be smarter than the gear. And we thread that in. You don't have to kill this. You don't want to get it too tight because you don't want to split this end grain. Oh, look at that. Right there, I can come down a little bit tighter, and now our nose cap isn't being held in by the ramrod. So as you, beginning gunsmiths, as you go, you'll start collecting various screws. You can buy them. Only buy what you need when you need it. I didn't start out by buying the 5-pound box of screws. I just happened to have that to go right along with my 5-pound box of nuts. Reassembling a Peabody is a little sequence critical. There's a roller in here that the breech block spring goes on, and that's got to go in first. And you got to think like, do you really want a squatty taking this thing apart out in the field? And you really don't. So you have to look at this. Now, the breech block, this spring and that whole thing right there is an epic spring. And do not take this out if you can get away with it. This spring here is actually in a tunnel. It has to be laid underneath and popped up. You'll get it. Breech block comes in from the top, and you got to make sure that it's on that roller there, all right? And what we found is you come to the rear, and you got to make sure that you compress this thing down into this mortise. I have to reach in front of you here. This has to get shoved up in there like that. And then you push this all the way through so that it's proud right here, just a little bit proud. That's going to be important here in just a second. Okay? Then the extractor and the lever have got to be put in such a way that the two lobes grab up in front. So the way to do that then is once you have this captured, you put this screw through. It's this one right here. Get up in there. There we go. That goes in. All right, so we did the roller, then we put the breech block in, and then you pop the breech block down. If you pop it down, this fits right in between the ejector block. The ejector goes up in, and that whole thing fits right there. And it just feeds right through, and you're not fighting anything. So with the exception of a couple of points where you have to have latent screw tension on something in order to, or latent spring tension in order to make it work. Other than that, this gun is actually, when I say easy to assemble, if you don't know the order, you'll never get it back together again, because this is the total amount of throw of this thing. So let me get this screw run down. Okay. We get that screw run down, and then there's your open and shut, right? And then in order to check that, we'll just take an empty 43 Spanish here, pop it up in there, take it shut, and out she goes. All right, so now we know we got that. So I'm just running this screw home in this plate right here. Nothing fancy. This is actually a very low parts count gun. It's really weird. Some of these early guns are really simple, and some of them are so hideously complex that it's not even funny. So this is going to screw down on there. And you would believe that in order to get this screw in, you had to have this lever out. So you see this whole thing is a big sequence of operations here in order to be able to get it back together again. I'm on a learning curve here, and we have discovered that this can be taken in and out. So we've just taken this lever out, and we're going to reassemble the rest of the gun, and the lever's the last thing to go back up inside of it. This keeps popping out on me. And it keeps popping out on me. There we go. This whole gun is stressed. Okay, 1, 2, 1, here we go. Remember to push the trigger forward because you don't want the sear to be running into the top of the trigger tail. Make sure you have that forward there. Okay, so we have an interference here. Something is going on because we used a different kind of tumbler and the sear is actually bumping up against the bottom of the stock, and we're going to have to make an allowance here and either cut or slightly bend, because as we're putting this in, it's pushing on the bottom of this. So we didn't know that until we tried to get here. So that's still another thing you got to do gunsmithing wise. It's just not letting us go to full cock. I'll make a quick tweak here. We'll be right back. I'm back. We've done a bunch of things. You can see the four ends on the gun. I put the rest of the gun back together again. You've seen one guy screw in or screw up a sling swivel. You've seen all of that. What I did is I changed some of the angles on this here. And now we can bang on this thing and the hammer doesn't drop, which it was doing before. So we inletted some wood, and I just did a very mild stoning on this here in order to pick the angle up. That's it. And right now we've got big bore black, man. And I'm gonna tell you, smokeless is a passing fad. A Japanese contract Peabody. We did a little bit of work on this thing. We made screws, pins, springs. We fitted a brand new tumbler to it. When we got it, it was coated in rust. It was nasty. And what we've been able to do is with some 43 Spanish ammo, well, I gotta pop it a little bit harder than that, but we'll get it working. Luckily, this weapon had its cleaning rod, so we'll see what it's gonna take to pop that out. The ammo that we were using, okay, it didn't take that much to get it out. Didn't change the size of the cartridge at all. So we're pretty sure this gun's not in the Murata cartridge. We'll fire one more round here and see what we got. Big bore black. There's not much difference. It's all about 70 to 80 grains of powder, moving about 400 grains of lead. Heavier, lighter, more powder, less powder. If you got a little bit of time, look up the Sandy Hook trials And you'll see what the U.S. government went through. They wanted to know whether or not they were supposed to go up to more powder or if they wanted to go to heavier bullets. And they made the decision to go to heavier bullets. And I'll tell you, this thing kicks like a mule. But, oh, see, that one ejected. I don't know. Jury's out for me on this one. I like Peabody's, though. And I have an extra round of ammo. So, on that note, outstanding. Let's go outro this thing so you guys can see it. Everybody thinks these things are British, but they're not. They're American. This particular one is in 43 Spanish-ish. We found a few things out there when we were shooting. The chamber on this gun is a little bit irregular. It split 2 of those rounds of brass and yet held itself together, and I hit what I was aiming at. We'll look at that, but there's an enormous amount of work you've got to do to get one of these guns back to find out why it failed. Why did they stop running this and not screw it into the dirt? I hope you guys got something out of this particular episode here. A lot of what we've done over again. We're going to keep doing it and just show you the things that you need to go learn. And just remember, if you're not screwing up, you're not learning anything, because eventually there will come this magical day when you will get paid to screw up. And as always, it's been a pleasure.